Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to grecochess, the channel of chess. In this video, the Queen's Chess Club, the quad tournament that took place yesterday night, 3 rounds. In this video, I'm going to show to you what happened in round number 1. Let's first look at the announcement of the tournament, and let me share the screen with you. Here we are. The QCC Winter G30 Quad, it's called officially. What does it mean? It means that players are divided into groups of 4 based on their ratings, meaning the top first players are in quad 1, the next 4 in quad 2, the next 4 in quad 3, and so on. Totally, there were 4 quads, and I was, with my rating, I was in quad number 3, meaning with the players rated 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. You see here, it is 3 rounds, and every round is G30, D5, meaning when the game starts, players have 30 minutes on their clocks, and for the first 5 seconds, when it's your turn to play, the clock does not move, and then it continues going downwards. I was going to play against the other 3 players of my quad group, and let's see who was my opponent in round number 1. His name is Guy Rawlins. His regular rating is 1630. If you look at the details, after last night's game, the previous one was it's called the abbreviated Mass Open, but it took place in the year 2020, meaning for 6 years he didn't have any rated games. But let's see how he was going to play. Because you may remember I had an opponent of rating of 588 that had not played for a few years, and he had advanced and destroyed me in the meantime. Let's see what will happen with Guy Rawlins and me versus him. But let's compare his rating with mine. Mine is 1631, the official. Unofficial has gone down a little bit to 1620. So more or less even. But let's see what happened at the board. Here, let's move the analysis board of chess.com. What's going to happen is here I'm going to enter the moves one by one from the score sheet, copying them from the score sheet that I have in my hands. The computer is going to say what is the evaluation with with positive number means white is doing better, negative that black is doing better. And by how much? 1 point means one, as if you had 1 extra pawn. It's going to say which move would have been the best, the top 5 moves for the player whose turn is to come, and also is going to make a comment on the move, anything from brilliant with 2 exclamation points to blunder 2 question marks. And let's see. Guy had the white pieces, start with pawn going to c4, then reply with pawn to e5, control of the center. This is the so-called English opening, and now it's called the King's English variation. Next pawn, Guy sends it to g3 to prepare for fianchetto, and my pawn goes to c6 to block the diagonal that he's going to occupy. Once his bishop is in g2, he occupies diagonal from h1 to a8, and they want to block it. So yes, nominally he'll have this diagonal, but it's going to be blocked by my pawns. That's why after he plays his bishop on g2, I place my pawn on d5. Next move, he sent his knight to d3, excuse me, to f3, from g1 to f3. And computer doesn't like it. Until now, we're playing book moves, meaning moves analyzed by opening theory, and this move, computer thinks it's inaccuracy. So we are now off the book. My bishop goes to d6 to defend my pawn on e5. Computer would rather have me push my pawn on e4, but then you create a hole on d4. I'd rather not push pawns unless there is a reason why. Next move, short-term castling, kingside castling, short castling or kingside castling for Guy. And I developed my knight f6. We completed the first 5 moves, and let's give a look at the score. It's almost even. I have a very small advantage of 0.17 says here. Pawn to d3 for Guy to liberate his bishop from c1. And kingside castling for me. Knight to c3, Control of the center, develop the knight. And I push my pawn to d4 in order to attack the knight on c3 and force it to move again. Knight goes to e4 now. Not too many options. Either b1, but why send the knight where it started? That's what the bots are doing, if you remember. And then, of course, my pawn to b5. He goes to b4, and I'm not sure what he could do. Or maybe take. He would be in a tough situation. Actually, no, let's review again. His knight was on c3 and was attacked by pawn on d4. Where did it go? It could go back to b1 by why send it where it started. That's what the bots did last time, if you remember, and they lost to move waste. Or go to a4. But then my pawn to b5. Let's see what happens if knight goes to e4. My pawn on b5 is going to attack it. Not yet, because it's not going to attack it because I'm going to lose a pawn. But if knight goes to e4, let's see what's going to happen. I cannot attack directly, but I might first push my pawn to a6 and then my pawn to b5, and really the knight is not very stable. What else could Guy do to have it safe? He just did. He could do what he exactly did: knight to e4, and now we're changing knights. And my other knight goes to d7, and his bishop goes to g5 to attack my queen. And I reply by my queen going back to e7. And so we completed the first 10 moves, and let's see what is the score. I'm ahead a little bit by 0.58. That doesn't mean too much yet. Now we're going to exchange bishops. Pawn to e3, which the computer thinks a mistake and increases my advantage quite a lot. But let's see what's going to happen. We exchange pawns on e3, and my queen goes to c5. What's happening is my queen is attacking the pawn on e3, and if he takes it, it comes with a check. And Guy is going to see it and defend himself by placing his queen on b3. My knight goes to f6 to attack the pawn on e4. Guy is going to defend it by sending his knight to d2. And now I want to develop my bishop from c8. And also, I want, if I develop it, not to be worried about the pawn on b7. That's why I'm pushing my pawn to b7. My bishop now can go in either of the two diagonals. Before it could go to the diagonal from c8 to h3. Now it can also use the other diagonal, goes from c8 to a6 without having to worry about the pawn on b7 in either case, because the queen here, you see, is on b3. I was really thinking any chance I could let him take the pawn on b7 then check from a3, but I felt, why not secure the b pawn first? We finished the f15 moves. Let's see what is the score. I'm leading a little bit by 1.05. But the e pawns, I have to tell you, they're great weaknesses. Isolated double pawns. You don't want to have these kind of pawns. This would give me some advantage, especially if I can exploit it. Let's continue. Queen goes to c3. And my knight goes to g4. My knight is attacking the pawn on e3 twice, once by the knight on g4 and once by the queen on c5, and it's defended only once by the queen on c3. So Guy decides to defend by the knight to b3. His knight attacks my queen. So if my knight takes it, I lose my queen. That was the idea. But this is a blunder because I have a second option. What if my queen takes on e3? And that's exactly what I did. I win a pawn. Great moves to the computer, I think a little bit too obvious. And Guy is not a situation. Queens will be exchanged either way or other. He decides, let's take with the queen. If he didn't and his king went to h1, I would exchange and have his c pawns double and isolated. So that's what he takes. I take here. His rook goes to f2, so both defends the rook that was under attack and also gives extra protection to the b2 pawn. But I win a second pawn on c4. Now he protects again the pawn on b2 by sending his rook to b1. Mistakes is a computer, and my bishop goes to e6 to give protection to the knight at c4. We completed the first 20 moves and things seem to be going my way. I'm ahead by 3.46. Now the advantage seems to become important. I have 2 extra pawns. None of my pawns is passed, meaning if all the pawns would disappear, yes, it's nice to... If all the pieces would disappear and we had only kings and pawns, I would have kings and 7 pawns versus king and 5 pawns, but none of them is passed. So with a good defense, Guy might have a chance. But let's see what happened. Guy sends his pawn to a3 to take more space. My knight goes to e3 now. Knight goes to d2 to give more protection to the pawn at e4. And since I'm ahead in material, I want to exchange. His bishop is not that good here. In fact, a bad bishop. But I don't want it to suddenly come into the game. And usually bishops are a little bit better than knights. I'm not sure if here this would be the case or not. So I decide to exchange on g2. The more pieces I exchange, the more important my extra 2 pawns become. Even though I don't have yet passed pawns. I wish I had, but that's all I have for now. The rook goes to d8 to occupy the open d file. Knight goes to 3 to attack my pawn on e5, and if he can take it, it will be very good for him, but instead I send my pawn to f6 and stop his attempt to win the e5 pawn. His pawn goes to b4 now, trying to start an attack on the queen side. My rook goes to d3, attacking the pawn on a3. And Guy defends it the only way he can. Rook goes to a1. Not the only way. He could have sent the rook from f2 to a2 instead, but then his knight would have less protection. So that's how he protects it. But before that, yes, we completed 25 moves, and my advantage is 3.81. It's quite important, not yet decisive. Meaning, if I make a major mistake, it's gone. Rook goes to a1, and now my second rook goes to the d file. I completely control the open file, d file. In fact, this is the only open file of the board. Knight goes to e1 to attack my rook. My rook goes to d2, threatening an exchange of rooks. Since I'm 2 pawns ahead, the question is why not exchange? Knight goes to 3. And now the computer wants me to win the exchange by sending my bishop to h3. And then if the king takes, then I win the rook. But I was too much concentrated on the exchange. Since I'm down in material, let's win as much material as possible. Of course, he didn't necessarily need to take my bishop. He could have placed his king on g1 or f1, and still he wouldn't lose more material. No, g1, no, he could put to g1, not f1, g1. What he could have played if my bishop went here, of course, if he takes it, I win the rook. And for a bishop, meaning I win extra material. But he could play this, and then this. And then what could I do? Perhaps exchange rooks? Well, I wouldn't win any material, but my bishop on h3 would be extremely strong. But my mind was in exchanging to go to winning ending. So I take the rook, he takes back my rook, would change rooks on f2. And now time to start pushing the pawns, hoping to create a pass pawn. Pawn goes to c5. Computer thinks it's plainly good. The problem is that if we exchange, yes, I have a pass pawn, but I have an extra pawn island. The pawn on c5 is isolated, but I was hoping that with my rook and bishops, I could support it well enough. And he exchanged, and now really I have an isolated pawn on c5, but it's a pass pawn, and I can put the rook behind on c8 and support it as much as needed. I decided, and we completed the first 30 moves. My advantage is 3.85, staying the same between 3 and 4 approximately. I have 2 extra pawns material-wise. I have a pass pawn on c5. The odds are on my side, but for the time being, it's only the odds, nothing more. His rook goes to b1 to occupy the other open file that has been created. My pawn goes to c4, protected by my bishop. His rook goes to b2, and my rook goes to d3, attacking again the pawn on a3. So to check, fortunately, my king is square to go on f7. If I had not pushed the pawn to f6, it would have been back rank checkmate. I would have lost the game. So this is one more advantage of replying to his knight on f3, attacking my pawn on e5, replied by pushing the pawn to f6. King goes to f7, only move. No. There were other moves, only reasonable move. Of course, I could have placed my rook on d8 or my bishop on c8. That's why the computer did not place the arrow only move. But it was the only sensible move. King to f7. Rook to b7 check, hoping to win my pawn on a7, but that would not be the case. I defend. And Guy decides to exchange the rooks. Exactly what I want. The more materials exchange, the nearer I'm to winning. And now with my pass pawn, can I keep it? Can I protect it until the end? Because if I lose it, for example, if he can bring king and knight to attack it, he can bring his king to c4 and his knight on d2, I lose a pawn. I still have an extra pawn, but it's going to be much tougher for me to win. Let's see what's going to happen, however. King goes to e3, to come near the pawn. My king goes to e7. Also, I'm trying to centralize my king. King goes to d2. I make sure that I block as many access points as possible. The bishop goes to c6, attacking the pawn on e4. So if by any chance he wins it, I win the pawn on e4. Still, I'd rather have my passed pawn, but 2 pawns are 2 pawns. His king goes to sorry, we need to delete this move because I think I copied wrong. The next move was his king went to e3 to protect the pawn on e4. My king goes to d6, centralize my king coming near the action. His knight goes to d2 to attack the pawn on c4. And I defend with my king. I didn't want by my bishop because then his pawn could go to a4 and I could lose it. Pawn to h3, he's trying to see what does he do on the king side, push pawns as much as possible. My bishop goes to b5, gives extra protection to the pawn on c4. His pawn goes to h4. And I send my pawn to h5 to block it. His knight goes to b1 to protect perhaps his pawn on a3. My pawn goes to g5. Knight goes to c3, attacking my bishop on b5. Exchange. Exchange on h4. And my pawn goes to a6 to protect the bishop on b5. At this time, he places his knight on a2. And we are now near the last 5 minutes. According to the rules, you don't have to keep notes in the last 5 minutes. I have an advantage of 5.14. The game would continue for a few more moves until finally I resigned and I started the tournament with a win. But let's see, what does the computer have to say about the review? 83.9 accuracy for Guy, 87.6 for me. Guy played as if his rating was 2150, and myself as if my rating was 2350. No brilliancy is two great moves for me, three book moves each of us, best 17 versus 14 for Guy, excellent 16 versus 12 for me, good 6 versus 5 for Guy, inaccuracies 5 Guy, 3 me, mistakes 1 Guy and 1 each of us, in fact 1 me, and 1 blunder for Guy. This concludes the first game. I started to win. I had 2 more games to play that evening, but we'll see what happened at the next game at the next video. In the meantime, let's give a look at the tournaments that I've been following. Nothing new in grecochess. Still, the last game is still going on between Maxim Kovoruk and Barak 7. And let's see what is happening at the Underwater Moonlight 9 Moons Tournament. Round number 2, 28 players still remain, and also nothing new here in the first round. We're waiting for Stanilor to conclude his games, otherwise most of the others have been completed, with Maxim Govoruka, Ema MMT, and Khaled Katab being ahead for the time being. Zanilo, by the way, is my subscriber and the organizer of the tournament. 2, 3, 4 games, everything is over. We know who advanced. In 2 it is Mebius PGO74, Mathis B 2008. In 3 it is Tinan Fu, Iraq Lion, and Steam Rocket. And in 4 it is Vival Ladivia 5, Lysithia Vantres, and Vienkar Vanans. So we know 9 advanced players and most likely 10 Maxim Govoruk. I think he's advancing no matter what. And that's it for now. That's it for this video. I started with a win at the QCC Quinches Club, the Quads tournament. 2 more games to go. I'll show you the next game in the next video. This is Greco Chess. I'm your host, Harry Lauseniziris. And for now, thanks once again to all the viewers. Thanks for watching, subscribers, to the likes and the comments. And for now, goodbye.